warm welcome to you from the parish of Mottingham, St Andrew with St Alban. This is the Reverend Ian Welsh here, and it's very good to welcome you for this recitation of T.S. Eliot's groundbreaking poem, The Waste Land. The poem was composed 100 years ago, and Eliot was writing in response to circumstances that bear, by a strange and unhappy coincidence, a remarkable resemblance to those of the current worldwide pandemic crisis. As you will recall, following the 4 devastating years of conflict from 1914 to 1918, the world was swept by a global Spanish flu pandemic, in which a staggering 50 million people lost their lives, compared to the considerably lower figure, although just as shocking, of 20 million casualties during the World War itself. Drawing upon the Arthurian myth of the Fisher King, whose kingdom had fallen under the curse of infertility and drought, in his poem, The Waste Land, Eliot explores parallels between this mythic Arthurian world and the grim social realities facing our own world in the post-First World War context. Now in 2020, 100 years on from the events that afflicted Eliot's generation, the so-called lost generation, we are ourselves experiencing the tragedy of a global pandemic, struggling to overcome the ravages of an invisible enemy. This common experience across the generations is much in keeping with one of the principal insights of Eliot's profound and fascinating poem, that there are patterns of repeated human experience across history, so that again and again human beings will experience tragic suffering and the struggle to make sense of life, as well as being inspired by the quest for spiritual meaning, new life and salvation. Embodying a truly modernist and multi-faith impulse, Eliot draws spiritual inspiration from diverse sources, from the legend of the Holy Grail, from St. Augustine's Confessions, from Dante's Divina Commedia, from the Buddha's fire sermon, and from the Hindu scriptures, the Upanishads. These allusions to different spiritual traditions shine a light of redemptive hope into the grim social realities besetting post-First World War Europe, as well as, of course, for our own very challenging times. In order to articulate his universal vision, Eliot abandons a traditional linear narrative and weaves his poem together through repeated patterns of image and illusion. Throughout The Waste Land, Eliot makes startling and abrupt transitions from one scene or context to another. There's no immediately apparent or logical link between the different filmic snapshots of which the poem is composed, and the reader infers the change of scene from sudden shifts in tone and imagery, which Eliot is a deft master of establishing. This means that the poem is unified by an associative as opposed to a linear principle of order, and this has the effect of making all times and places seem interconnected and simultaneous. To give an example of Eliot's use of contextual merge and overlap, one could cite his description of the crowd of morning rush-hour commuters flowing over London Bridge in the London of his own times, as they hurry to reach their offices and desks by the appointed hour, marked by the clock of the Church of St. Mary Woolnoth, with what Eliot evocatively describes as a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. In describing the office worker's joyless daily routine, Eliot quotes from Dante's Divine Comedy. "I had not thought death had undone so many." And so he makes a link between modern times and medieval Florence, and also, of course, with the souls flowing through the gates of hell, as described in Dante's grim and epic vision of the afterlife. In the same opening section of the poem, Eliot also refers to London as an unreal city, which is an allusion to Baudelaire's City Full of Dreams, a quote given in Eliot's notes to his own poem, and taken from Baudelaire's influential poetry collection, Les Fleurs du Mal, or in English, The Flowers of Evil. In quoting Baudelaire, Eliot links mid-19th century Paris with Eliot's bleak vision of 1920s London. This universal frame of reference is made even more explicit in the poem's fifth and final section, entitled What the Thunder Said, in which Eliot underlines the transience and illusory nature of all great cities and civilizations, past and present. To quote from that section, falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. Such patterns of allusion, motif, and repetition within the poem give the wasteland its dense and quasi-musical unity. A number of key archetypal figures and images, akin to musical leitmotifs, contribute to the poem's closely woven unity. Significant among these are the mythic Arthurian figure of the Fisher King, whose sexual impotence has brought a curse of drought and infertility upon his whole realm. This figure appears in a variety of guises, underlining the theme that the spiritual character of a nation's leadership has implications for the health of the nation as a whole. If you like, that a nation gets the leadership and the government it deserves. Highlighting another key figure, Eliot cites also in his notes to the poem the Theban prophet Tiresias as a central unifying voice who, like the poet himself, who is conceived of as a prophet for modern times, observes and comments on the spiritual character of society without himself taking an active role in the events as they unfold. In contrast to the prophet's passive observation of events, Eliot's feminine archetype, the Lady Belladonna, a name which ambivalently evokes both female beauty but also deadly nightshade and the femme fatale. Well, she plays an active role in the poem. Belladonna appears in various guises throughout the work, as the aristocratic Marie in section 1, then subsequently in allusions to Cleopatra, to the mythic character Philomela from Ovid's Metamorphoses, Shakespeare's Ophelia, Lil in the contemporary pub scene, Queen Elizabeth I, and also another contemporary woman, the typist in section 3, and again in the Rhine Maidens from Wagner's Götterdämmerung, and so on. In keeping with the medieval theory of correspondences, according to which the monarch in the state is seen to correspond with the sun in the solar system, all the female characters in the wasteland are seen to coalesce, expressing different aspects of a common feminine archetype, whether noble and romantic as derived from literary or historic sources, or sordid and debased in accord with Eliot's bleak view of modern urban life. In keeping with the poem's quest for spiritual hope, regeneration, and meaning in a degraded and materialistic modern world, Eliot establishes water in both its life-giving and destructive potentialities as a central motif. On the one hand, there's the desire for rain in order to bring new life and fertility to the parched earth, and on a symbolic level, spiritual regeneration for the soul, as offered through the waters of baptism, and the key purifying role that water plays in religious ritual. On the other hand, the Thames of the contemporary industrial context is seen as polluted and contaminated. Water is likewise the hostile element in which Eliot's key character, Phlebas, the Phoenician sailor, drowns on a mercantile voyage, as recounted in the poem's short fourth section, death by water. As so often in Eliot's work, both the positive and negative associations of an image are counterpointed in a mutually illuminating way. Given the absence of linear continuity, on first encounter, the poem can seem elusive and puzzling, but it repays renewed acquaintance and study. And before long, its resonant rhythms and its richly interwoven patterns of imagery weave their magic on the reader. The wasteland has a magical incantatory power that continues to surprise and delight on each fresh reading. It has an evocative charm that works as much through the carefully chosen foreign language quotations as through Eliot's mother tongue mastery. Eliot contends with characteristic challenge that poetry most succeeds and delights when only half understood. Given this precept, we may take comfort when, at times, his poetry seems baffling and obscure. Despite these challenges, there is enough that is immediately appealing and engaging, and there's always a keen sense that there's more to unravel, discover, and understand in the future. But that's quite enough by way of preamble, and the time has come to let Eliot's daring and innovative modernist poem speak for itself, for it is justly regarded by many critics as the greatest poem in English of the last century. Here, then, 100 years on from the period of Eliot's intensive work on composition, for it wasn't published until 1922, is the poem that completely reshaped the poetic landscape for subsequent generations. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Section 1. The Burial of the Dead. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten, drank coffee and talked for an hour. Bin gar keine Russin, stamm aus Litauen, echt Deutsch. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousin's, he took me out on the sled, and I was frightened. He said, "Marie, Marie, hold on tight." And down we went in the mountains. There you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Frisch weht der Wind der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind, wo weilest du? You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet. I could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence. Oed und Leia das Meer. Madame Sosostris, famous clairvoyante, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, was known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, she said, is your card, the drowned Phoenician sailor. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel, and here is the one-eyed merchant. And this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Equitone, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many, I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet, flowed up the hill and down King William Street, to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours, with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. There I saw one I knew, and stopped him, crying, Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at Mylae, that corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men, or with his nails he'll dig it up again. You, hypocrite lecteur, mon semblable, mon frère. Section 2. A game of chess. The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble, where the glass, held up by standards wrought with fruited vines, from which a golden Cupidon peeped out, another hid his eyes behind his wing, doubled the flames of 7-branched candelabra, reflecting light upon the table as the glitter of her jewels rose to meet it from satin cases poured in rich profusion. In vials of ivory and colored glass unstoppered lurked her strange synthetic perfumes, unguent, powdered or liquid, troubled, confused, and drowned the sense in odors. Stirred by the air that freshened from the window, these ascended in fattening the prolonged candle flames, flung their smoke into the laquaria, stirring the pattern on the coffered ceiling. Huge seawood fed with copper, burned green and orange, framed by the colored stone, in which sad light a carved dolphin swam. Above the antique mantle was displayed, as though a window gave upon the sylvan scene, the change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced. Yet there the nightingale filled all the desert with inviolable voice, and still she cried, and still the world pursues, jug, jug, to dirty ears. And other withered stumps of time were told upon the walls. Staring forms leaned out, leaning, hushing the room enclosed. Footsteps shuffled on the stair. Under the firelight, under the brush, her hair, spread out in fiery points, glowed into words, then would be savagely still. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you are thinking. Think. I think we are in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones. What is that noise? The wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing. Again, nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember those are pearls that were his eyes. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head but oh, 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 that Shakespearean rag? It's so elegant, so intelligent. What shall I do now? What shall I do? I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4. We shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes, and waiting for a knock upon the door. When Lil's husband got demobbed, I said, I didn't mince me words, I said to her myself, hurry up, please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back, make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did, I was there. You have 'em all out, Lil, and get a nice set, he said. I swear I can't bear to look at you. No more can't I said. And think of poor Albert. He's been in the army 4 years, and he wants a good time. And if you don't give it him, his others will, I said. Oh, is there? She said. Something of that, I said. Then I'll know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please. It's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you can't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique. But only 31. I can't help it, she said, putting a long face. Them pills I took to bring it off, she said. She's had 5 already, and nearly died of young George. The chemist said it would be all right, but I've never been the same. Oh, you are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, there it is, I said. What do you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please, it's time. Well, that Sunday, Albert was home. They had hot gammon, and they asked me in to dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. Good night, Bill. Good night, Lou. Good night, May. Good night. Ta-da. Good night. Good night. Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night. Good night. Section 3. The Fire Sermon. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed, and their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. By the waters of Liman I sat down and wept. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud or long. But at my back in a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones, and chuckle spread from ear to ear. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank, while I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck, and on the king my father's death before him. White bodies, naked on the low damp ground, and bones cast in a little low dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only year to year. But at my back from time to time I hear the sound of horns and motors, which shall bring Sweeney to Mrs. Porter in the spring. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter and on her daughter. They washed their feet in soda water. Et oh, ces voix d'enfants chantant dans la coupole. Twit, 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 jug, 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 jug. So rudely forced. Zero. Unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter noon, Mr. Eugenides, the Smyrna merchant, unshaven, with a pocket full of currants, CIF London, documents at sight, asked me, in demotic French, to luncheon at the Cannon Street Hotel, followed by a weekend at the Metropole. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi, throbbing, waiting, I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violet hour, the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from sea, the typist home at tea time, clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. Out of the window, perilously spread, her drying combinations touched by the sun's last rays. On the divan are piled, at night her bed, stockings, slippers, camisoles, and stays. I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs, perceived the scene and foretold the rest. I too awaited the expected guest. He, the young man carbuncular, arrives, a small house agent's clerk, with one bold stare, one of the low, on whom assurance sits as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. Time is now propitious, as he guesses. The meal is ended. She is bored and tired, endeavors to engage her in caresses, which still are unreproved, if undesired. Flushed and decided, he assaults at once. Exploring hands encounter no defense. His vanity requires no response, and makes a welcome of indifference. And I, Tiresias, have forsuffered all, enacted on this same divan or bed, I who have sat by Thebes below the wall, and walked among the lowest of the dead, bestows one final patronizing kiss, and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. She turns and looks a moment in the glass, hardly aware of her departed lover. Her brain allows one half-formed thought to pass. Well, now that's done, and I'm glad it's over. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone. This music crept by me upon the waters, and along the Strand, up Queen Victoria Street. Oh, city, city, I can sometimes hear, beside a public bar in Lower Thames Street, the pleasant whining of a mandolin, and a clatter and a chatter from within, where fishmen lounge at noon, where the walls of Magnus Martyr hold inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold. The river sweats oil and tar, the barges drift with the turning tide, red sails wide to leeward swing on their heavy spar. The barges wash drifting logs down Greenwich Reach, past the Isle of Dogs. Why la la la, wa la 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 la. Elizabeth and Leicester, beating oars, the stern was formed, a gilded shell, red and gold. The brisk swell rippled both shores. Southwest wind carried downstream the peal of bells, white towers. Why la la la, wa la 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 la. Trams and dusty trees. Highbury bore me, Richmond and Kew undid me. By Richmond I raised my knees, supine on the floor of a narrow canoe. My feet are at Moorgate, and my heart under my feet. After the event, he wept. He promised a new start. I made no comment. What should I resent? On Margate stands, I can connect nothing with nothing. The broken fingernails of dirty hands. My people, humble people, who expect nothing. La la. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest, burning. Section 4. Death by Water. Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit and loss. A current undersea picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, or you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. Section 5. What the Thunder Said. After the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and the crying, prison and palace and reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains, he who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience. Here is no water, but only rock, rock and no water, and the sandy road, the road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink amongst the rock. One cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry and feet are in the sand. If there were only water amongst the rock, dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit, here one can neither stand, nor lie, nor sit. There is not even silence in the mountains, the dry, sterile thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red, sullen faces sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water and no rock, if there were rock and also water, and water, a spring, a pool among the rock, if there were the sound of water only, not the cicada and the dry grass singing, but sound of water over a rock where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees. Drip, drop, drip, drop, 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 drop. But there is no water. Who is the third, who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding, wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or a woman. But who is that on the other side of you? What is that sound high in the air, murmur of maternal lamentation? Who are these hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon only? What is the city over the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air, falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings. And bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings and crawled head downward down a blackened wall, and upside down in air were towers, tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hours, and voices singing out of empty systems and exhausted wells. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves, about the chapel. There is the empty chapel, only the wind's home. It has no windows, and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. Only a cock stood on the roof tree. Cock-a-ree-co, cock-a-ree-co. In a flash of lightning, then a damp gust bringing rain. Ganja was sunken, and the limp leaves waited for rain, while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant. The jungle crouched, humped in silence. Then spoke the thunder. Da, da, da. What have we given? My friend, blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract. By this and this only we have existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries, or in memories draped by the beneficent spider, or under seals broken by the lean solicitor in our empty rooms. Da, diadvam. I have heard the key turn in the door once, and turn once only. We think of the key, each in his prison, thinking of the key. Each confirms a prison. Only at nightfall, ethereal rumors revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus. Da Damyata. The boat responded gaily to the hand expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating obedient to controlling hands. I sat upon the shore, fishing, with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Poi s'ascose nel foco che lì affina, quando fiammuti che le don. Oh, swallow, swallow, le prince d'Aquitaine had a tour abolie. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. Why then, I'll fit you. Hieronymo's mad again. Data, Daedvam, Damyata, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That concludes this reading of T.S. Eliot's groundbreaking poem. And many thanks to you for joining me for this excursion into poetic modernism. I hope you've enjoyed this literary interlude, and I hope to see you again before too long. In the meantime, take care, keep safe, God bless, and to reiterate the concluding words of the wasteland, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. formulaic words of blessing from the Hindu Upanishads, which roughly translate as the peace which passes all understanding. May that peace be with you all.